Hi everybody, I'm Kathryn from the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore and the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake. Welcome aboard. Today we're going to talk about this awesome BabyLock Brilliant and all the things that it can bring to your sewing room and your sewing experience. All right, let's get started. Okay, I'd like to talk to you before we get jumping into instruction about the awesome features that this machine has available. Some of the little mini why would I get that machine kind of points. So first of all, the BabyLock Brilliant has 190 stitches included. And within those stitches, you also have 10 one-step buttonhole styles. The BabyLock Brilliant also comes with a knee lift, which is incredibly helpful if you need to have access to your project with your hands to keep control. And then the knee lift helps you lift your presser foot while your hands keep control of your project. Another awesome feature is that this machine has an advanced needle threader, so you are not responsible for trying to find that eye of the needle. The machine's going to do that for you. You also have an awesome LCD screen, so everything that's going to be helpful in terms of what foot to use, what your length and width settings are, that's going to be right there on your LCD screen. And because you have an LCD screen, and because this machine is computerized, you also have customizable, programmable stitch functions. So you can set up a stitch to perform the way you want it to every time you turn on your machine, which is totally awesome. Your sewing bed width, also just so that you know, this is one of the key features of this machine. You've got 8 1/8 inches in here. So you can have all the distance you need to manage your larger projects. It's really, really incredible and at a great price. So now let's jump into what's included in this machine and how we can use it for our best advantage. Okay, once you open up the box, you're going to have a plethora of fantastic included accessories with the BabyLock Brilliant. They give you some really awesome regular feet as well as bonus feet. So let's talk about the accessories that are going to be included in your box. Okay, so first of all, you of course are going to have a power cord. So you've got your power cord. You also have a soft cover for your machine. That's going to allow you to keep the dust off of it. You also have your knee lift, your included knee lift. That again lets you raise your presser foot with your knee, allowing your hands to stay on your project. You'll have an accessory pouch, which is going to have a lot of your bonus feet in it, as well as your accessory tray. Now, with this accessory tray, there are little notches here, little levers that are going to hold your feet in, which is great because when you turn it upside down, they're not going to go falling out and flying everywhere on you. Okay, so let's talk about the standard included feet. So first of all, you're going to have your J foot, which is your standard regular utility presser foot. You'll have your N foot, which is your decorative stitch foot. You'll have your G foot, which is your overcasting foot. You'll have your R foot, which is your Blindhem foot. You'll have your I foot, which is your zipper foot. And of course, you can attach that on either side. Your M foot, which is your button fitting foot. Your A foot, the letter A is right there on the tip of it. This is your buttonhole foot. And those are your 7 standard presser feet. All right, so let's talk about some of the awesome included feet that you get as bonus feet. You have a walking foot. This is excellent for managing multiple layers of fabric. This is a stitch guide foot. You've got all these notches on here, which allows you to line up your first line of stitches down here so you can form your second line of stitches. So it's really good for channel quilting, or even if you need to gauge an odd seam allowance, like a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Those are awesome. You've got a 1/4 inch foot with a guide. So for quilters, that is an awesome foot. You've got an adjustable zipper and piping foot. This allows you to move in and out in case you had like a thick piece of rope that you were making as a piping around an outdoor chair or whatever. It's just, this is fantastic. You also have a free motion quilting foot. You have an open toe candle wicking foot. And oh my gosh, one of my favorite things, you have a Teflon foot. This is going to allow you to sew over vinyls and fabrics that have a bit of a slick, sticky surface on them and makes it just smooth as butter. You'll have a collection of bobbins, of course. You're going to have 2 bobbin covers. You're going to have a 1/4 inch with marking foot, which is really good in case you need to do quilting and piecing, but you'll also have this bobbin cover, which is blank so that you don't get distracted by markings. You'll have a twin needle and a multi-pack of needles. This is your awl. It actually will allow you to poke holes in your fabric on the one end, and once you've poked that hole, you can actually thread cord down through that and pull it back through. So that's a really, really cool tool. Seam ripper, which we all need. You've also got a cleaning brush, which is really good for when you need to clean your machine, which should be often. I just put my mom voice on. This is a thread net, which is helpful when you have fussy threads. You're going to have 4 spool caps, 1 large, 2 mediums, 1 small, and you're also going to have this size, which is the mini spool cap. And again, depending on what size spool you're using, you want to match your spool cap to that size spool. You're going to have a couple of screwdrivers so that depending on what screw you're removing or reattaching, like on your needle plate or on your needle or on the bolt on the side, if you're taking off your ankle to put on, say, your walking foot, which goes directly on the shaft. So you've got a variety of screwdrivers, and you have your auxiliary spool pin, which is for when you're using your twin needle. This will install your second spool of thread on this actual auxiliary spool pin. Excellent. So that's it for your included accessories. All right, let's begin with your basic setup of the machine, which of course starts with installing your power cord. Your power cord is going to have a flat side and a rounded side. You're going to want to install it so that matches your port, with the flat side towards the back of the machine and the round side towards the front. To install your foot pedal, you're going to take the end of the plug and simply install it right in the port. On the side of the machine, you'll find your power toggle, so just simply toggle it to this single line in order to turn your machine on. When using a twin needle, you're going to need your auxiliary spool pin. So let's talk about how to install that. So first of all, it's going to install right here on your bobbin winder. If you look at the bottom of your auxiliary spool pin, you've got this little round area, which is going to simply push down on top of your bobbin winding area. And then you're going to spin the spindle so that both your spindles are facing to the right. To install your knee lift, you're going to simply take this knee lift. Now look real quick here that there's like little wings off the tip of it. So you're going to line those wings up with the little insertion point here at the bottom of your machine and simply just push your knee lift in. Then you're going to have your knee lift installed. To remove your accessory bin, you're simply going to place your hands under here, grab the accessory bin at the top, and pull out. To reinstall it, simply gently slide it back in until it clicks back into place. Here on the back of the machine, you're going to find a lever which allows you to drop your feed dogs if you want to disengage them for free motion quilting or some other optional sewing treatments. So you'll see that for the most part, you're going to have your feed dogs engaged. So that means you've got these little triangles down here and they're piercing the line, which means your feed dogs are active and ready to sew. When you want to drop your feed dogs, you're simply going to pull that lever over this direction and it's going to drop those feed dogs for you. Now, when you want to reinstall your feed dogs, you're going to pull the lever back over to this side, the end towards the end of your machine. However, they don't automatically raise back up. What happens is you need to take a full sewing rotation before they come up and they engage themselves. In order to install the bobbin, we're going to place it right here on the bobbin winding spool pin. You'll notice that there's a little wire that kind of hangs out, and on your bobbin, there's actually a groove that's going to slip into. It's very hard to see though, so just simply start by pressing your bobbin right down onto that bobbin winder pin. There isn't an upside or a downside or any of that, just press it on. Now spin it to the right until you hear a click. What happens, click, is that wire has now fallen into the groove on the bobbin. So now that's going to hold the bobbin in there nice and tight. Okay, So now you're going to place your spool on your spindle. You want to make sure that your thread is coming off the bottom of the spool. That's how they ask you to do it. However, if you've got an old style spool that's got a slit cut in it, those really, the older the spool, the worse that it is. So you need to make sure that slit is down here on the right end, or just throw it away because it's old thread. The main thing is you don't want your thread passing over any cuts that are going to cause you problems. Okay, so then you're going to install your spool cap. You want to match your spool cap to the size spool that you're doing. Again, so that it's not too big, not too small, and not going to get caught up on anything and get you in trouble. Okay, over here you can see there are two sets of lines. You have a solid line and a dotted line. The solid line is for threading the needle. The dotted line is for doing your bobbin. Both of those start right here behind this area at number 1. So I'm going to start by bringing my thread around number 1. Then I'm going to swing my thread under this little metal hook and straight back up as pictured. Now, I like to trade hands because I like to take my left hand and hold on to the thread so that I've got some tension right there. Okay, here we're going to need to place our thread in between this little metal rail and this little metal disc. So we're going to start at the back and we're going to come straight down in between those two things, and then I'm going to swing over to the right. Now that way the thread is held nice and tight under that little pre-tension disc. At that point we're going to come straight over to the bobbin, giving yourself some excess thread, because clockwise we're going to wind our thread around our bobbin 6 or 7 times. Once you've done that, if you take a look, there's a little kind of like cutout right here. You're going to simply roll your finger off your thread roll the thread off your finger into that little cutout and pull the thread to the right. There's a razor blade in there which is going to cut any of your excess thread, and it's going to pinch it and hold it right there nice and tight under your bobbin. You'll push your bobbin over to the right, and that's going to engage it against this little guide right here. And once you've done that, you're going to either step on your foot pedal to wind it, or you can simply select your start stop button. You'll notice that your start stop button is orange because we're in bobbin winding mode. So you can touch start and just wind as much bobbin as you need for your project. When you're happy with the amount of bobbin thread that you have, you're going to simply select stop. So in order to get your bobbin off of the bobbin winder, you're going to push it towards the left to disengage the winding mode. You will lift your bobbin up off of your bobbin winder, and because it's right there, I tend to use the razor that is on the bottom case to just cut my bobbin thread. Okay, so let's talk about installing the bobbin into the machine. To install your bobbin into its area, you're going to start by taking this rectangle right here with the little arrow facing the right, the inside of the machine, and pull that to the right. Your bobbin cover will pop open. Once you've got that, you're going to drop your bobbin right down into the machine. And when you do that, you need to make sure you're on P for perfect. This thread is going to come off of your bobbin counterclockwise. Once you've got that at your P for perfect, simply drop your bobbin right down into the machine. Okay, so now that I can see my thread is turning counterclockwise, I'm going to swing my thread around this area right here. If the back of the bobbin is noon and down here at the front you're at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock is where your tension disc is. So you need to make sure that you're going to lock your thread in there nice and tight. You do that by pressing down onto the bobbin with one hand and then swinging nice and tight 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, so that it swings right down into that tension disc. At that point, you're going to take your thread up over this area, keep following that path around that mountain, and then right there at the end, you've got your razor, which is going to cut your excess thread. Once you've got your excess thread removed, you're going to take your bobbin cover, which has that little nub right there. That little nub is going to place itself right underneath that metal tab, and then you're going to push down on it and it clicks it and locks it back into place. So in order to thread your needle, you're going to start back here at number 1 again, just like you did with your bobbin winding. So you're going to start by bringing your thread from the right towards the left around this little hook. Then you're going to swing your thread underneath this metal hook right here and head straight back up. Okay, once you're there, we're going to follow this path around to thread the machine. However, before I do that, I want to point out that right here is where the first tension discs are. So you want to make sure your presser foot is in the lifted or up position before you even start threading your machine. Okay, so now that I've got the thread here at number 2, we're going to swing around to the left following the solid line. So once we've got it swung around there, we're going to come straight down. And we're going to then, right here, U-turn at number 3. So we are going to swing around towards the left. We're going to come up on the right side and swing around towards the left and come down on the left. That way we've ensured that we've caught our thread in this uptake lever. Once we do that, we're going to come right down here past number 5. Okay, so right here we're at number 6. There's actually a little piece of metal on top of this needle bar. So you're going to need to place your thread so that it catches behind the needle bar and pops into position right there at number 6. Once you're there, you're going to pass by this area on the way up to number 7. And when you put it in number 7, it's going to kind of click into place there. Over here on the side of the machine, there's a razor which is going to cut your excess thread. So you're going to take your thread past that razor and simply pull on it to remove that excess thread. Now, before we actually thread the machine, it's very important to put our foot down so it's out of the way of the threader. Then we're going to reach up and use this lever to thread the needle. And with a little bit of gusto, you're going to push the lever down. That will thread your needle for you. I'm going to take a second here to talk about the needle. When you're done with your old needle and you need to change your needle, you're going to install it by removing your first needle right here. You'll loosen the screw and pull the first needle out. When you put the second needle in or your new needle in, you're going to do that making sure that the flat side of the needle is facing the back of the machine, flat back. And when you install it, you're going to insert it in here and you'll know you're at your highest point of installation when the needle is touching that little round dot. That's the stopping point for the needle. It's very important to make sure that the needle is all the way installed, touching that, so that your needle threader doesn't break. We would not want that to happen. So once you've got that needle touching that dot, again, you'll tighten your screw right here and your needle will be installed. When you want to change out your presser foot, you're going to start by squeezing this little lever here at the back of the machine towards the front of the machine, and your presser foot will simply drop right off. All right, when you want to install your presser foot, you're going to notice that you've got a bar at the front of your foot, and it's going to line up exactly with this little clamp. So you're going to position your presser foot directly under that, and then slowly and delicately lower your presser foot lever until it grabs right a hold of that presser foot. To raise and lower your presser foot lever, it's here at the back of the machine. Simply gently take it and bring it down, and then push it back away from you to raise it. Let's begin by talking about the buttons that you see and the knobs and the levers right here on the front of the machine. First of all, right here you've got your start-stop button. When you don't have your foot pedal plugged in, you can use this to start sewing and stop sewing. You'll notice that it's red because right now it's in the stop mode. It's not ready to sew. When you put your foot pedal down, your presser foot down, there it turns green because it's ready to go. And just FYI to point out, when your bobbin is engaged, now it's going to be orange because it's in bobbin winding mode. So that's your start-stop button. Above that, you've got your reverse button. Reversing is when it's taking stitches backwards. This is your reinforce key. This will lock a stitch in place. And this is also an intelligent reinforce key, which will allow us to finish a pattern in decorative sewing right there when that little light turns green. And I'll go over that in more detail when we get to that section of the instruction. This is the needle button. If you touch it wherever the needle is, it will go into the other position. So right now my needle is up. If I touch this, it will go down. If it's in the down position and I press this, it will come right back up. This is your cut button. Always cut on fabric, not on air, meaning make sure there's always fabric visible within the mouth and needle area of your foot so that it can have the proper tension to perform the cutting. This actually does three things, this lever here. This is the speed when you do not have your foot pedal plugged in. So if I'm sewing and I want to go super slow, I can take out my foot pedal and simply put this on slow and touch my start button and it will sew nice and slow. If I have the foot pedal plugged in, this acts kind of like a jockey holding the reins on the horse. If I have this slow and I have my foot pedal plugged in and I slam on the gas, it's not going to go anywhere because it's slow. However, if I put it up on medium and I slam on the gas, it only hits that medium speed wall and will not go any faster, which is where I usually keep mine. Or if you put it all the way to the right and you slam on the gas, now your foot is in total control. So if you're pressing really hard, it's going to go fast. If you're pressing your foot pedal very gently, it'll be much slower. The third thing that this does is width control. It can marry where this is with your needle position. And let's go into a little bit more detail about that. So let's talk about width control. So first of all, I'm going to start by turning it on. I will begin by going to my operational menu and I'll select over to width control, which is on page 2. And I'll go more into that in a little bit when I get there. But right now I'm going to take this width control and turn it on and return out of this screen to see our zigzag screen. Now notice over here that my width is at 7 and that's the widest width possible because this is pulled over to the right. As I move over to the left, those numbers have changed because I've married where my needle width is with where my speed lever is. So I can go from a wide zigzag to a straight stitch all just by selecting this lever and changing its position. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. We can create some like audio sound waves. So I'm going to go ahead and step on my foot pedal and I'm going to start by being wide and now taking it towards the left, and that's a straight stitch, and then to the middle, to the left, off to the right, to the middle, to the right, and I'm gonna cut because I've gone haywire with my fabric, but let's look how cool that looks. So this allows you to have a wide zigzag, a straight stitch, a medium zigzag. You have total control over your needle position by turning that width control on. When you're done using the width control in this fashion, make sure that you turn it off. This is very important because again, when it is on, it locks your needle position into whatever position you have your speed lever on. So if I'm trying to sew in left needle and I've got my speed lever all the way on the right and my width control is on, my needle will be in that right needle position and I'll be screaming, why can't I get my needle in the left position for the stitch I've chosen? It's because I forgot to turn my width control off. Make sure it's off. This little knob right here is your tension knob. Basically, it should pretty much remain at 4 for all of the normal sewing that you're going to be doing. However, it does give you the option to spin it to a lower tension or to a higher tension if you're using some sort of tricky thread or trying to perform a certain decorative type of stitch that calls for it. However, most of the time you're going to leave this on 4. That's just your standard tension, and that's where I leave mine 99,000,000% of the time. This beautiful BabyLock Brilliant comes with over 190 stitches that you can access for your sewing journey. You're going to begin by opening your lid and you're going to have access to see where all of those are. You don't even have to dig out your manual to select a stitch because it's right there pictured for you in the lid of your machine. So as you open your lid, you're going to notice that your stitches are grouped together with lines delineating each section. So like stitches are going to be grouped together. Your utility utility stitches are grouped together. Your decorative stitches are grouped together once and twice and 3 times, and your lettering stitches are grouped together. So in the top left-hand corner of each grouping, you're going to notice that is where you access that particular section of stitches. So if I want to do something in utility stitches, I'm going to pick one. Oh, I want to do straight stitch left needle with a reverse, stitch number 01. So I'm going to start by coming to this utility key. So here on the face of my machine, I'm going to select my utility key, and then I'm going to type in 01, and that brings me to the first stitch on that utility key, and it's pictured right there. If I want to then do something decorative, like say I want to do this little candle wicking stitch here, number 24, I'm going to touch that leaf vine icon 1 time, and then I'll type in 24. So here I come down on the face of my machine, and it asks me, hey, is it okay to let go that thing you were working on a second ago? Yeah, it's okay. So I'll select okay, and there I am in leaf vine 1, and I'm going to type in 24. So there we have pictured my beautiful little candle wicking stitch. So again, that's how you access these different stitches available to you on this beautiful BabyLock Brilliant. So I'm going to talk about the reverse and reinforcement functions on the machine. So I'm going to start by selecting this key right here. This keypad way of stitch selection is going to access these 10 most commonly used utility stitches. So I'm going to select number 1 right there, which is a straight stitch left needle with a reverse. Now, if I'm performing this stitch completely manually, I'm going to go ahead and start sewing and stop. Then I'm going to hold down my reverse button. As I do that, it continues to reverse for me until I want to actually stop. Now, if I need one more stitch, I'm simply going to tap that reverse button and it'll take that one more stitch. Now I'm going to go ahead and start sewing again. When I get to the end, you can either select stop, or you can right away as you're sewing, if you know right where you are, you can tap your reverse button and it is only going to do that one stitch. So you got to hold it until you're happy with the number of stitches, start sewing, stop sewing, cut your thread, and lift your foot. So that's all manual. However, the machine has some wonderful features that works more efficiently for you. So if I want the machine to automatically do the appropriate amount of stitches in reverse for me at the beginning, I'm going to start off by selecting the automatic reverse button right here to the right of the LCD screen. When I've selected it or engaged it, you'll notice that that blue light comes on for you. That just indicates that it's on. This feature is turned on. So now when I start sewing, it's going to start sewing 3 or 4 stitches forward, the right number. It automatically reverses for you, and then it keeps on sewing. Now, I get asked all the time, how does it know where it ends? It doesn't. I'm the one with eyeballs, so when I come to the end, I'm going to touch my stop button, and if I need to take one more stitch, I can needle up, needle down to get there, and then when I tap my reverse button, the machine is going to automatically do the right number of stitches, come back forward, and stop for me with the needle in the down position because that's where I've got it set up. So now I'm going to simply cut my thread, lift my foot, and I'm ready to go. So it did that automatic appropriate number of stitches for me in reverse at the beginning and end of my stitch. All right, so now we're going to talk about this reinforcement key and the difference between the reverse and the reinforce. So let's put another piece of fabric under here and put my foot down. All right, so now I'm going to select stitch number 2. Stitch number 2 has a dot at the beginning of it as opposed to a dash at the beginning of it. That's going to indicate for me that this is a reinforcing stitch or a locking stitch. I have my automatic reverse function engaged, so let's see the difference between reversing and reinforcing. And I can see right there I'm on my keypad way of sewing and stitch number 2 is selected for me. So now when I start, it's going to stitch exactly in place. And when I get to the end of my sewing, I'm going to tap my reinforcement key and it stitches in place the right number of stitches exactly for me. And I'm going to cut and I'm going to lift. All right, so let's look at those side by side. So when I look at that one, I can see it's just got a nice tight little lock or a little knot right at the beginning and at the end. But when I look at my reversing, there's several stitches forward and several stitches backwards. So there's a big difference there. Quilters far prefer the reinforcement because it's just not going to get that buildup of extra thread, which garment sewers have to really lock in the beginning and end of their seams. So that helps you by automatically doing the right amount of stitches at the end and at the beginning. So again, you just have to indicate on your machine when you're at the end by selecting your button. Now, this button here is the automatic cut function. So when I select that, it turns blue, indicating that it's on. However, let me show you one thing real quick right here. When I touch my automatic reverse button, only that feature engages. However, when I touch my automatic cut button, the automatic cut and the automatic reverse buttons both engage. So now both of those features are turned on for me. So I've gone back to stitch number 1 here, which is a straight stitch with a reverse. So I'm going to go ahead and select start. It comes forward. It reverses for me the right amount of stitches. When I get there towards the end, exactly where I'm done and I'm ready to keep moving on, I'm going to tap my reverse button. It's going to reverse, come back forward. It pulls the thread down underneath and cuts it for me, which gives me these beautiful little tails. So I can just pull my fabric out and I'm ready to move on to the next piece. Let's talk about editing and modifying and customizing our stitch length and our stitch width. So right here on the face of your machine, you've got what looks to be a W. This is where we edit our stitch width. And right here, we've got a dot, a dash, and a long jump. That's where we modify or edit our stitch length. So how do I do that? Right below this, there's a little line and there's a less or more, a minus and a plus. So if I want a wider width, I'm simply going to touch my plus button until I'm happy with my stitch. Test stitch your stitch ahead of time. And then over here, we've got our dot, our dash, and our long jump. So if I wanted a shorter stitch length, I would simply select my minus button to decrease my stitch length. So increase with the plus, decrease with the minus, and those indications are right underneath the particular setting. All right, I'm going to spend a moment talking about some of our editing features that are included here on the face of the machine. And I'm going to begin with the fact that this machine lets you save to memory your particular stitch settings if you do something all the time a certain way. For instance, if I was a paper piecer, I'm going to shorten my stitch length because I need to pierce my paper to do my quilting. So I can edit that stitch. And again, I'm going to do that by shortening my stitch length right here to say a 1.2. So once I've got that set that way, if I always do paper stitch piece stitching by selecting my keypad way of stitching on stitch number 3, right here you've got an arrow pointing into a diamond, and that, when I select that, will save my setting into the memory of the machine. So when I'm on my keypad way of selection and I select stitch number 4, now right there you can see there is no black background. So this is my setting saved into memory, which brings me to the fact that I'm going to point out that there, with the black background and white numbers, that's the default setting for the machine, and this is my customized setting on top of the stitch now. If I want to reset temporarily, right here we've got these couple of lines within that diamond. When I select that, it resets me back to default, which is my black background, white numbers. So to reiterate, this top button lets me save my setting into the memory as the setting for a particular stitch. This resets back to my defaults if I've made any changes. This third button here is a needle exchange key. There's the two arrows, and that's how I remember it, is that this needle's coming out and that needle's going in. When I select that key, it's going to lock the screen so I can touch any button that I want and nothing changes there. I can also touch my cut button or my needle up, needle down button or my reverse button and nothing is working. So that effectively locks up that machine for me so that I can safely change my needle without accidentally touching a setting and then start stitching and I stab myself and there's pain. No pain. Select your needle exchange key. It safely locks everything up. When you're done with it, you're going to select it again, and now the screen is reactivated and all of the buttons are also going to be activated. So that's your needle exchange key. And right below that, we have memory. So this memory is slightly different than this memory. When I select this one, this is saving a stitch setting into memory. This one would save a decorative path that I might have created into memory. So let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to go to my decorative stitches and pick something really pretty and create a stitch. So let's say I wanted to do a transportation stitch. This machine has this cute little love bug punch buggy and bicycles, number 27 and number 28 here in the decorative section. So I'm going to pick those two. So I'm going to select vine leaf number 1. So I'm going to select that button. And when I do that, again, it asks me, hey, are you sure you want to leave this area? Yeah, I'm okay with that. So I'm going to select okay. Now I'm going to type in number 27, which is the little love bug. So 27, and there I have my little love bug, and I'm going to select a single heart. So that's going to transition me over to being just one of that stitch. And right here you can see there's a single heart. Now I'm going to type in or add to that the bicycle, which is number 28. So I'm going to type in 28. So now I have one car and one bicycle. And if I want to make that continuous, which I do, I need to go away from the single heart and come back over to the continuous function, which is the heart and a half. So now I have the heart and a half a heart. So now I have my function, which is going to be a car, a bicycle repeatedly. And now I can save that into memory because I think it's super cute and I might want to get it again later. So right here, I've got the arrow coming down into the pocket. When I select that, I can select my pocket. Let's say I want to put it in pocket number 1, and then I'm just going to select OK. So it has saved that for me to access later. So let's see what that looks like real quick. And while we're here, I want to point this out. If I select this, it will allow me to finish either the car or the bike that I'm in the middle of stitching, instead of just stopping right wherever I touch it. So when I select that, my green light comes on and it's just going to finish that particular motif that I'm on, and it'll reinforce and cut for me because all of those buttons are selected. There it comes to an end. Okay, so as you can see, it finished that last bicycle out because I selected the finish reinforce key, the green light came on, and there I have the beautiful end to the bicycle instead of stopping in the middle of it. So stinking cute. Now, if tomorrow's a new day and I want to get out my bicycle car stitch again to access that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn the machine on. And the first thing I need to do is look right here. So that's selected and it looks like I could get there. However, this is like a calendar where you've got 30/31. Right now, I'm in the keypad way of selection. If I want to access my memory to get something out of my memory pocket, you can see the arrow coming up out of the pocket. I simply select that button again, and there I've got my stitch pattern. If I've saved multiple things into this memory pocket, I would simply select down to scroll down, and it won't let me right now because that's the only thing in there. So if I'm ready to go, that's the one that I want. I'm going to select OK, and there it pulls it out of memory and it's ready for me to work on again. All right, let's say I wanted to form a second row of stitches. I'm not going to want to start that second row in the middle of a stitch. I'm going to want it to start exactly looking like and at the same start of my first row of stitches. So over here in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got a star and a heart. This is going to allow that stitch to begin at the same beginning of the first row of stitches. It starts fresh, so that's a pattern fresh key. And all you have to do is select that, and you'll hear a little beep, and that'll indicate that it's ready to go. So I'm going to start stitching again, and you'll see it's going to start right at the beginning of that car, just like it did on my first row of stitches. So as you can see right there, we've got the beginning of our car just like we had the beginning of our car on that first row. Okay, I want to talk about this extremely cool function this machine has. This is a mirror imaging key or a flipping key. So depending on how you're feeding your project, you might want your stitches to form the opposite direction of their natural default selection. So right now, I've got the rake line on the top and the tines reaching down towards the bottom. If I select this button, you'll see that that flips the other direction with the line across the bottom and the tines reaching up towards the top. So let's put those two side by side and see what they look like. So again, it just gives you the ability, let's say I was appliquing a heart, I might want a blanket stitch around the outside of the heart, but if I was doing the reverse applique and sewing the fabric that I had cut the heart out of, I might flip it and stitch my stitch that direction. So it's a really cool flip or mirror image button. Right here we have a return to the previous screen and also a clear or delete button. So I want to talk about that for a second. So remember that really cute stitch we formed with the car and the bicycle? What if I want to do the car and a candle wicking dot and I don't want that bicycle anymore? I can, now that that bicycle is selected, I can touch this button and that clears that bicycle away, leaving me down to the car where I can type in the other stitch that I wanted, which was the dot, and now I can make that continuous. So that button right there, that clears away whatever stitch you've got selected, allowing you to select a different stitch. One of the most awesome features of the BabyLock Brilliant is the ability to customize. You have an operational menu, which allows you to really go in and nudge some nuancy settings on your machine, allowing you to get perfect stitches the way you want them, how you want them, when you want them. So let's talk about the operational menu. So first of all, right here on this side, you've got a couple of dots and a couple of lines. That is your operational menu key. When you make a selection change in here, you're actually changing the machine and telling the machine, listen, you need to work like this, which means if I was to turn my machine off today and I had 5 more towels to do tomorrow, the way that I had it set up, I don't want to have to go back in and reset the machine for whatever changes I've made. So when I turn the machine back on, it's going to hold on to those settings. So when I make a change to the operation of the machine, it's changed until I go back to my defaults. So if you're done with a particular project and you've made a change in your operational menu, you need to remember right then, go back and change back to your defaults so that you're setting your machine back up for neutral or for normal sewing, okay? All right, so I'm going to start by selecting that operational menu. You can see right away in the bottom left-hand corner that there are 8 pages of settings that you can make modifications to. We are on page 1 of 8 pages, and that starts off right here at the top. If I want to go to page 2, right below this, I have my minus and my plus. So if I want to go to page 2, I'm simply going to select that plus button, and it takes me to page 2 of 8 pages. If I had wanted to go to page 8, instead of selecting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I can simply select my minus button, and that takes me back over to page 8. So these buttons right here go backwards pages or forwards pages. All right, so right here on the first thing we've got is to check our ABCs. So if we had typed out Grandpa's t-shirt quilts and wanted to make sure we spelled it correctly, this is where we would scroll to the right, because you're not going to see that whole thing on the screen. You'd see Grandpa, and that's it. So to finish the sentence, I could scroll to the right. The next option on our operational menu is where our needle position is stopping. So in order to access that second line, this middle set of buttons allows me to do that. If I want to go down to line number 2, I'm going to touch my down arrow, which takes me down to line number 2. Now, right now, I have my machine customized to stop with the needle in the down position, which is what I want for now. But if I wanted it to stop in the up position, this third set of icons or arrows will let me do that. So I could select my plus button, and now you can see my needle is stopping in the up position, but that's not generally what I want. I like it to stop down to lock my fabric in place if I need to lift my foot. So my needle position is stopped in the down position. If I was to want to do a twin needle for decorative sewing or for hemming a garment, I would need to put this twin needle mode on. So I'm going to go down, and I would simply select my right arrow. That takes me to twin needle mode on. That would not allow me to pick stitches that would harm my machine. Okay, let's go to page, actually let's turn that off, and then go to page 2. So I'm adding to 1 to make it a 2. Width control, I've already talked about that it allows your needle to be locked into where your speed lever is, moving your needle position. So for now, we're going to go ahead and leave that off. Initial position. This selection refers to where your needle is when the machine wakes up. Right now, it's waking up with the needle in center needle position. Center needle is best if you're going to be quilting. You can do your 1/4 inch piecing stitch there and things like that. However, the left needle position, if you're a garment and purse sewer and don't do any quilting, you might want to wake up in the left needle position because there's more support around your needle and around your fabric when the needle is in the left needle position. So that truly allows you to customize your machine if you're garments and purses versus a quilter, or whatever you'd like to do for your particular style of sewing. Let's go to page 3. Page 3, the very first option we have here is elongation. So I'm going to select a stitch and show you what that actually allows you to do, okay? To best demonstrate elongation, I need to select my leaf way of sewing twice, not once, but twice. That's going to allow me to choose this beautiful little satin stitch scallop that we've got. This particular formation can be formed short or skinny, scallop, 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 or much, much longer. So I'm going to start by going down and selecting a single scallop. I'm going to go to my operational menu to page 3, elongation, and I'm going to set that down to an elongation of 1. Now I'm going to return out of the menu, and I'm going to select that same stitch number 11. This is my second one, and I'm going to go to my menu to page 3 and take it to an elongation of 2. Let's return out of here, stitch number 11, operational menu, page 3, elongation of 3. Return out of here, stitch number 11, menu, page 3, elongation of 4. There's only one more. Return out of here, stitch number 11, operational menu, page 3, elongation of 5. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So I can see that this is an elongation of 1, and it just gets longer, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It really does allow you to customize it. I have one customer, she does dolly dresses and little girl dresses. So proportionally, the elongation of one works for smaller objects, where the longer one would work for larger objects. A dress for a girl, a dress for a doll. The next option on page 3 is thread density, and there are going to be two options for this, a less dense version and a more dense version. So I'm going to select stitch number 4, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So I'm going to pick one motif and then stitch number 4 again. And now I'm going to go to my operational menu, to page 3, down to thread density, and I'm going to select dense. All right, so I've got one less dense and one more dense. Let's see what that looks like. So as you can see, this is the less dense version and this is the more dense version. Why would you have the option of either? So you can make your choice for your fabric. If I had a thinner fabric, I might choose the less dense version. If I had denim, like what I'm sewing on now, the more dense version would work just fine. The third option on page 3 of the menu is character spacing. So if you've typed out Grandpa's t-shirt quilts, you have the ability to then space each letter a little further apart from one another, and this would let you do that right here. On page 4 of our menu, we have size selection. Some of the stitches have a larger and smaller version, and you would simply select the larger or smaller version depending on what you want, what you desire. You also have here on page 4, fine adjustments vertical. You can make some slight adjustments to how your feed dogs are working here by selecting this. And I would only do that if I was struggling with how something was forming, depending on what fabric I was using and the density of the fabric. Generally, I don't come in here and make any adjustments, but I do have the ability to do so. Page 5 of your menu has presser foot pressure. So if I was working with a denim, I might want to decrease my presser foot pressure. If I was working with the chiffon, I might want to increase my presser foot pressure. Okay, page 6 of the menu. This has some basic settings on your machine, some utility settings for your basic operation of how it's actually functioning. Here we have the buzzer. You can turn it on or you can turn it off. However, I'll encourage you to leave it on in terms of the fact that when you touch something, you'll hear a beep that indicates you've touched it. There are occasions when I accidentally brush by my screen and select a different stitch, and this buzzer selection would let me know because right away with it on, it beeps and I'm like, oh no, what did I touch? So you can have your buzzer on or off, that's up to you. I suggest leaving it on. The light. This has to do with the bed light on the machine. So if I turn that bed light off, over here we can see we've darkened our sewing area. Why on earth would you ever do that? Well, if you were doing tone-on-tone sewing, you might want to turn your bed light off and aim a side lamp across the bed of the machine, and that would allow you to see the texture of what you were sewing if you had cream thread on cream fabric. Most of the time, you're going to leave your light on. Brightness has to do with the brightness of the screen. You can make modifications there if you need to as well. Page 7 of the machine starts off with one of my favorite features, reinforcement priority. If it was me, I would leave that on all the time, and let me explain why. Okay, so looking at stitch 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are straight stitch left needle with a reverse, straight stitch left needle with a reinforce or a lock. 3 is center needle with a reverse, and 4 is center needle with a lock. Now, I have never had the ability to have a reinforcing key on my machine until I got one of these beautiful machines. So let me talk about what that does. Okay, so right here on the face of your machine, you have your reverse button and your reinforce button. I've never had a reinforce button. So habitually, I always reach for this reverse button, even if I'm trying to say piece my fabric. So if I've selected, say, stitch number 4, which is a straight stitch, let me get out of the menu, utility key number 4. So if I've selected a straight stitch center needle position with a reinforce, and I reach accidentally for my reverse button, it's not going to reverse on me, even though I touch the reverse button, because I will have set my reinforcement priority on. Whereas if I have my reinforcement priority off and I touch the reverse button, it doesn't matter that I selected a reinforcement stitch. Without that reinforcement priority on, the machine's going to do what I told it to. With the reinforcement priority on, what happens is if I've chosen a stitch with a reinforce, it's going to do that for me regardless of what my stupid finger reaches for, which would be the reverse button. So honestly, I leave that on because it's like a save baby reflex. The machine's like, hey, you chose a reinforcing stitch and that's what I'm going to do for you. I got you covered, and I like all the coverage I can get. The next thing on page 7 is input sensitivity. If you feel like you're touching and nothing's happening, you can increase and decrease your sensitivity. Here, I haven't had anyone really struggle with that at all. I feel like when you get a new machine, you need to know how to use it, so you need to get used to the machine. Just go ahead and touch it the way it needs to, but that's up to you. You can select whatever language you need. Page 8 is the version. Now, occasionally there are updates for this machine. You really should have your machine brought in for service annually. Wherever your local dealer is, it's very important to keep that machine clean so that it operates efficiently. And your technician might look at this and decide, oh, they just launched an update and it's time to do it. So that's where the technician can see what version your machine is currently operating at. That's it for the operational menu. Okay, let's look at our J foot, our standard utility presser foot, and our N foot, which is the decorative stitch foot. And let's just talk about the differences for a second. So if you lay the 2 feet side by side, first of all, you're going to see that your J foot is longer. Your J foot is longer because it's going to grab control of your fabric faster. So it's just your standard foot. The openings are the same in both the J and the N. Over here on the right side of the J foot, you've also got your leveler button, which helps when you get to areas of height. It allows to keep your presser foot level for you. We have a video on that. You can access that later on if you'd like. The N foot is wider. The N foot is wider because it's holding a larger surface area under control for your decorative stitches. So the N foot allows that fabric to be managed in a larger surface area. The real magic, however, happens on the back of the feet. So if I turn these 2 feet upside down, you'll notice that here on the J foot, it makes contact with the bed of your machine. Whereas on the N foot, there's a channel carved out through it, which allows your decorative stitches to slip through unimpeded, unhindered. They just slide right through. So when you have a stitch that has a buildup of thread, it passes through without getting smooshed. This is our G foot, our overcasting foot. This is perfect for sealing the edges of fabric that fray. So what you're going to do is you're going to line your fabric right up against the inside of the toe on this foot. And the stitches are going to form over that bar right on the edge of your fabric. I just love this G foot. Now I'm going to show you two here on the back of it. There's this little nib which hangs down where your presser feet and your needle plate are. And it makes it a little tricky to get this foot on and off. So I recommend putting a piece of fabric under the presser foot so that you can put it on a little bit more easily. Okay, so I've selected stitch number 14 on the utility key, and that is the overcasting stitch that I just love to use for everything, stretch fabric and woven fabric, just because it looks the most like a serger and it's the most professional look to me. So I've lined my fabric right up on this inside edge of the toe of my G foot. All right, so let's see what that stitch looks like. You're going to slide your fabric off the back because the thread is wrapped around that little metal finger inside the foot. So gently slide it off the back of the machine, and there you have the most perfect and beautiful overcasting stitch. This is your R foot or your Blindhem foot. I love this foot too. So there's a big giant flange right there in the center of the foot, which we're going to guide the fold of our fabric up against to do the perfect blind hem. So let's get that R foot in place. Notice that this foot has the same thing the G foot had. It hangs down a little bit, so it's easier to install with fabric over the needle plate area. Okay, so to do our blind hem, we're going to start off by folding up our raw edge because you would not want a raw edge on a blind hemmed pair of pants or skirt or anything. You're going to cover up those raw edges. So you're going to fold that up and then you're going to bring the fabric down on top of it. It's almost like it makes the letter Z. And it's that fold that comes up against the flange on your foot, allowing you to form that blind hem. So I've selected utility stitch number 31, which is a blind hem stitch for woven fabrics. And I'm going to go ahead and start stitching. So what happens is it sews along this part right here, and then it leaps over and takes a nip off of the fold. Your job is to make sure that your fabric is actually getting sewn when it does take that nip. You don't want to miss it because then you'll have to stitch the whole thing all over again. So you keep gentle pressure against the foot so that that fold gets nipped as it goes along its stitching. All right, so there we are at the end. I'm going to go ahead and tap my reverse button. Once again, as before, the stitches have formed over the little finger that's there in the mouth of the foot. So you'll lift your foot and pull the fabric off the back of the machine. And it has nipped just a few little stitches right there on that fold. So when you have your blind hem, the right side of your fabric is going to be there and you've got little nips taken out of it and you have your perfect blind hem. Okay, let's talk about buttonholes. They're so easy. So you're going to start by marking your fabric according to your pattern requirements. That marking is going to appear when you place it under the presser foot, where you've got that marked line between your green markings on your A foot. You're going to have the perfect diameter of your button measured by opening up the A foot here. So you're going to simply slide it open. When you do that, here at the back, it opens up, allowing you to place your button into the foot. And then you need to squeeze the foot down on it so that it's holding the button in place. Now that it's got the button there, right here, the diameter of that button is measured and it'll sew the perfect size hole for the size button you've installed on the back of your foot. Okay, so I've placed my fabric underneath my A foot, my buttonhole foot, with the line where my buttonhole needs to start right there in the mouth of my foot between these two green markings. You'll also notice there is a red line right there at the center. That is the center of the buttonhole. That's where you're going to cut it open. So right here is where the diameter of the button is measured between these two arms on the A foot. And in order for the machine to know that that's the size of the button that I need to perfectly form it, you have to put the buttonhole lever down in between those two arms. So you're going to simply grasp your buttonhole lever and pull it straight down so that it rests in between those two arms. Let's sew a buttonhole and see what it looks like. Okay, so there we have our perfect little buttonhole. When you're done making your buttonholes, you need to be sure and grasp your buttonhole lever and push it straight back up into the machine. Your M foot is your button fitting foot. It allows you to sew your buttons on so you don't have to do them by hand anymore. One of the important features of this foot is that there's a little lever here, which you're going to want to extend towards the front, and that extends a little plastic arm so the needle will form the stitches into each hole over that little arm, and it gives you a little bit of wiggle room so your button isn't sewn quite so tightly against your clothes. You want to make sure as you install your button in this foot that you are lining up the holes of the button next to the back corners of the little inlets there, the little coves, and by the red markings on the foot. And your button is sandwiched right there in between the bottom of the foot and the top of the buttonhole foot. It's important before sewing this that you check your clearance, your needle clearance. So I'm going to begin by turning the hand wheel towards me to make sure that my needle is going to insert itself into the hole of the button. I'm good on the right. I'm just going to check the left. I'm good on the left. So now I can simply touch my start button, and the machine's going to sew back and forth in each little hole about 8 times. Once it's done, lift your foot and then pull your fabric towards you, and it removes the button from the foot. There you have your button sewn on. Saved you all kinds of time. Woohoo! This is your zipper foot, your eye foot. And one of the cool things about this is that you can attach this foot on the left or the right depending on where the teeth of your zipper are or which side that you are currently going to be sewing on. The magic of this foot happens on the back of the foot. So as you can see, there are grooves worn off to the left side and right side, which allow the teeth to sit right up against that particular part of the foot. So it helps guide you and keeps you exactly in position. Let's sew a zipper and see what that looks like. Okay, so I've lined my fabric against the side of my zipper tape, and I've got the teeth facing right side up. Those teeth are lined, like I said, right up against the edge of my foot, and my needle needs to be in a position where it's going to fall right down into that cove. So I'm going to adjust my needle position so that it makes sure that it falls into that cove. So I'm going to change the width on my straight stitch, which allows me to put my needle into a position where it's going to directly fall. So I'm going to check that real quick, turn my hand wheel so that it comes towards me. And as you can see, it's right there in the center of that area, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to start sewing. It's doing a locking stitch because that's the one that I chose. Okay. So let's see what that looks like. When you're done, you'll just lift your foot and you'll flip your fabric over, and there you can see, you can give it a top stitch if you need to, but it's performed that perfect little stitch right along the edge of your zipper. The teeth haven't been sewn in and everything is good to go. This is your walking foot, and it's going to install directly against the needle shaft of your machine. So this part's going to go on your needle bar. It'll go up over it, and we're going to need to remove the presser foot holder so that this can install right onto your machine. The cool thing about the walking foot is that it does manage those multiple layers for you because there's a set of feed dogs under the bottom of the foot which grip your fabric at the same times as the feed dogs that come up out of your needle plate. To install the walking foot, the first thing you need to do is remove your presser foot holder. So you can use your disc-shaped screwdriver or whichever screwdriver works for you. It's going to go in that bolt, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, and that is going to fall right off. So you're going to bring your walking foot from the back of the machine towards the front of the machine. You're going to install the little claw part right over your needle bar, and then the side here where the foot clamps directly onto your drive shaft. So you've got this between the needle bar and that directly against the drive shaft. And then you just need to tighten your bolt. So there we've got it nice and tight. The claw is working so that as the needle is coming up and down, your claw is going to make the teeth on your foot work in conjunction with your needle. Excellent! Well, that wraps up the instruction portion of our lesson. I hope you've learned a lot. And if you don't have this machine already, I hope you've realized what an awesome machine it would be to have. Now, we have this machine available for purchase in both of our locations, both at the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore in Maitland, Florida, as well as the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake up in the Villages, Florida. We also have it available online on our website, www.sewing.net. Now, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Take off and sew. Bye.